We believe fundamentally that food solves hunger, that shelters solve sleep, and that housing solves homelessness. And if we're going to solve the problem of those that are out on the streets that we define as homeless, we better solve the housing problem if we're going to have an impact. And that's why we established this framework, what we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco.
So that was Gavin Newsom when he was the mayor of San Francisco back in 2008. As you heard, he had a 10-year plan to solve homelessness in San Francisco. So by 2018, I imagine homelessness in San Francisco, I imagine it was solved. And according to Axios San Francisco, by 2022, it was not solved. And it's not from a lack of trying from California's and San Francisco's political leadership. Mike Schellenberger talked about this in his book, San Francisco. According to Schellenberger, San Francisco remains significantly more generous in its cash payments to homeless and other spending to serve them than other cities. For example, San Francisco's maximum general assistance cash welfare monthly benefit for the poor is $588 as compared to $449, $221, and $183 for individuals in San Diego, Los Angeles, and New York City, respectively. While New York City, Chicago, Phoenix, and San Diego spend 3.5%, 1.1%, 0.9%, and 2.5% of their budget on homelessness services, San Francisco spends 6%. When local, state, and federal funding are accounted for, San Francisco spends roughly $32,000 per homeless person just on housing, not including general assistance, other cash welfare programs like temporary assistance for needy families, and other services. And what got me interested in this topic for today was I saw this article on the Wall Street Journal titled, California Spent $17 billion on homelessness. It's not working. Saying the Wood Street encampment for years drew people with nowhere to live until a fire made finding a solution an urgent and frustrating task. This is written by Christine Myduke and Jim Carlton on June 2nd. Now, this talks about Oakland in all fairness, not San Francisco, but, California. It's the progressive paradise. This is where Democrats really get to really try out their big ideas and see if they work or not. $17 billion California has spent on homelessness, and it's still not going good. City firefighters arrived mid-morning at a homeless camp on Wood Street to quell a fire spreading a tinderbox landscape of discarded furniture, debris, abandoned cars, and dwellings fashioned from tents, tarps, and plywood. Fire crews struggled for more than 2 hours. There were not enough hydrants because no one was ever supposed to live on the stretch of dirt that snaked between Interstate 880, the freeway connecting Oakland to San Jose. Yet, over 6 years, the property had become home to more than 300 homeless people, addicts, the mentally ill, and those unable to get a grip on Bay Area housing with a warehouse job or a construction gig. The fire last summer spit thick black smoke that temporarily halted commuters. Soon after, the California Department of Transportation, which owned most of the land, announced it would start tearing down the makeshift shelters. The July 11th fire appeared to have done what state and local officials had failed to do: force a decision to clear the camp. A months-long legal and bureaucratic battle followed. In a display of humanitarian, practical, and political forces trying with limited effect to solve the urban homeless problem. The number of homeless people in California grew by about 50% between 2014 and 2022. So as we can see, at least in San Francisco, going from 2008 to 2018, I don't think Goofy Gavin's 10-year plan worked. The state, which accounts for 12% of the U.S. population, has about half of the nation's unsheltered homeless, an estimated 115,000 people, according to federal and state data last year. It also has among the highest average rent and median home prices in the United States. And this is a topic I've talked about a lot over the years. A big reason for this is environmental protection laws, which started with Governor Ronald Reagan back in the 1970s, notably with the California Environmental Quality Act, also with prevailing wage mandates and zoning laws depending on the city. But in terms of environmental protection laws, a lot of Democrats, especially in big cities and throughout the state, have imposed even more environmental restrictions on housing development. I think even Oakland a couple years ago imposed a new ban on gas lines in new housing developments, meaning new housing developments in Oakland, California cannot be built with gas pipelines, so no gas stoves or gas heaters or other gas-powered appliances in new homes in Oakland, California. Article goes on to say, state officials said that it was the city's responsibility to house people kicked off the Wood Street property. Oakland officials said they did not have enough shelter beds. Residents fortunate enough to get a federal housing voucher struggled to find an apartment they could afford with it. Many of the drug addicts and mentally ill on Wood Street wanted nothing more than to be left alone. About 30 people filed a federal lawsuit against the State Transportation Department, also known as Caltrans, and the city of Oakland for the right to continue living at the Wood Street encampment. They were among those who initially rejected spots at shelters because they could not bring their pets or all of their belongings. You have to give up everything you own just for a place to sleep for a night, said Jazz Colibri. She was one of those who filed the lawsuit, which after months of back and forth was decided against her and the others. By March, those who resisted authorities were living on a sliver of the property that the Oakland Fire Department called unsafe, unsanitary, and which posed a range of public health risks for the unhoused people living there, neighbors in surrounding area, and the firefighters who respond to incidents 24 hours a day. The fire department said it had been called to 816 fires at homeless camps in Oakland during the year that it ended in October 2022, including 63 around the Wood Street camp. Fires spread out of control mostly by people cooking with propane tanks or burning materials for heat, the department said. When you have these homes that are fabricated and you have open flames, there's going to be fire incidents. Reginald Freeman, then the city fire chief, said after the fire last summer. California spent a record $17 billion combating homelessness the past 4 fiscal years. For the state budget year starting in July, Governor Gavin Newsom has proposed another $3.7 billion. Voters in Los Angeles and San Francisco, which have some of the largest homeless populations in California, again, 15 years ago, San Francisco had a 10-year plan to finally solve homelessness. And San Francisco still has one of the largest homeless populations in California. Anyway, voters weren't happy enough about it to approve taxes costing them billions of dollars to fund anti-homelessness programs and housing in recent years. So far, cost overruns and delays have left little to show for the money. State and local officials have bickered over responsibility. Mr. Newsom late last year threatened to withhold funding from local governments that he believed were not attacking the problem aggressively enough. That included programs to move squatters willingly or not. Wood Street became home to many people largely because no one ever forced them to leave. After being shooed by authorities from streets and parks, they found what seemed a permanent hideaway tucked beneath a freeway in an industrial zone of building material suppliers and sound studios. John Janasco recalled Oakland police in 2016 telling him to go to Wood Street and you'd be safe. No one will bother you down there. Word got around and the number of people grew. The city brought in portable toilets, shower trucks stopped by weekly, and some residents rigged up their own, connecting garden hoses to a nearby public water line and using a generator to heat the water. Kelly Thompson, a 75-year-old Vietnam veteran, moved his 30-foot RV there in 2018. He said his $1,200 a month Social Security benefit was not enough to afford permanent housing. And this is the grand irony I notice with a lot of this stuff. Again, a major reason why housing in California is so insanely expensive is because of environmental protection laws, which have stifled the development of new housing for decades to the point where we have a severe housing shortage here in the great state of California, causing housing prices to skyrocket.
That's just not smart.
To the point where retired Vietnam veterans cannot afford a place to live on $1,200 a month. And then you consider all of the environmental protection laws that stifle development, some of which are done in an effort to save the world from climate change. The irony is that now the environment is even more dangerous, especially in big cities throughout the state of California, where homeless people are setting up encampments that are filled with trash, where they have to use generators to heat their water, and they use propane to cook their meals. So we have all these laws where you can't build new housing with gas lines because we can't have gas stoves or gas appliances anymore, which drive up housing to the point where more and more people live on the streets and more people create fire hazards by setting up encampments using propane cookers, propane tanks, and generators to heat water, which create fire hazards, which create more smoke. This does not mention all of these stories I've read over the years about stuff like sewage and drug needles being littered about, all of this trash being littered about the streets because people have nowhere to go, because we have a shortage of housing in effort to save the environment. And to make matters worse, it's being reported lately that a lot of homeowners insurance companies like State Farm and I think Allstate are starting to shrug. They're starting to flee California because it's not profitable enough for them to issue new homeowners policies. And I saw an article on Reason magazine the other day that claims that a big reason for this is California regulations on homeowners insurance. And I think another reason is because housing is so insanely expensive, construction is so insanely expensive that whenever a disaster happens, you need to rebuild a home, it costs a lot more than it should. Or if someone is just given a check to maybe buy a new home, housing prices are so insanely high that insurance companies, they're fleeing the state now because it's not profitable enough for them to issue new insurance policies to prospective home buyers. This is what's going on in the state of California. Now, the good news is that legislators and politicians in California, they're getting to work on these problems. Homelessness, high cost of living, high housing costs, insurance companies, homeowners insurance companies fleeing the states. And what are politicians, what are legislators doing in California right now? What are they working on? Apparently what they're working on is new laws to save consumers from Skittles and Mountain Dew.
You absolutely suck!